Hi Scorpio, welcome to your May 2020 Astro Update. It's Reina here. And it's really interesting when you look at transits for the month because when you see what houses are affected and what sign you're dealing with, you can see that even if I'm not talking about a bunch of transits in your own sign. This is like the next best thing because there are going to be transits to your eighth house, which is the house that you rule. So Gemini for you is that house. And when I make these blanket statements, I want you to keep in mind, and this is for Scorpio Sun and Scorpio Rising, that this is a general forecast. And the reason to say that is to be as exact as possible because these transits will not be 100% in a particular house that I say for some of you because of what degree your sun or rising sign is in Scorpio. But they're still handy to just get a quick glimpse of things in a general sense. So when I don't want to have to keep saying, but it might be this house, it might be that house. For me, it's not something I can just say at the top of my head usually, and I don't want to confuse things. Plus, in your natal chart, you may have more than one sign in a particular house. So that's, a big reason as well. But for you, the eighth house is Gemini, generally speaking. And this is where some of this activity will be occurring, including the sun going into that particular house. And this is happening on May 20th. The big news in the month of May is that the North Node is going to be going into the sign of Gemini, the South into Sag. Now, for you, this is going to be, that doesn't indicate any kind of special time for you. I don't know what will, because you rule the eighth house, and the North Node going in there means that what you represent, Scorpio, in the next 18 months is even more enhanced, is even more encouraged by the universe. And the opposite house, the second house of earned income, which is a very practical place to be, is, I don't want to say discouraged, but it's de-emphasized. We can just call it that. So that you're not so caught up in that idea of making money. Now, of course, we know we need money to live, but taking it further than that at this time is not necessarily where the universe wants you to go, because in the eighth house, there's, yes, it is a money house as well, and it deals with shared resources. So, for instance, in relationships, you may be more called upon to share what you have instead of just be, consumed with the idea of having as much for yourself. But it's also, there are other facets to the eighth house which deal with even esoteric, spiritual, metaphysical study, or doing some kind of work in that field. But I think I'm going to make separate videos for all of the signs on how the North Node is going to affect them. And so I just wanted to mention that that's one of the things that's happening. I don't think I've mentioned that in some of my other astrological updates. So there's that, and then there are 3 retrogrades, and I'll mention those as they come. I'm going to try to be chronological about some of these transits. Going into the month, the sun is in your opposite house, the 7th house of committed partnership. So there's a spotlight here on marriage, committed partnership, and yet on the 7th, there's a full moon in your sign. So for some people, you might be let's say you're planning a wedding, or you are pondering whether or not to move in with somebody. You may have a download about your own needs around the 7th that kind of puts those questions, or kind of answers those questions for you, because it will be about honoring yourself. Perhaps somebody else has been pushing for you to commit to them and to marry them, or, possibly marry them. And you're kind of realizing what your needs are. Anytime we have a full moon in Scorpio, it's going to be, quite emotional, quite intense. But especially for you, because this is happening in your own sign, it really will be the time to consider whether or not this is the right decision for you. Now, this is a situation where I can say that if you're, because this is at 18 degrees of Scorpio, so if you're in the last 10 degrees, 12 degrees of Scorpio, later in the sign, this will actually be falling in your 12th house. And so therefore, that will have a more of an effect of kind of letting go of any kind of thing that has been keeping you down, obstacles in your way, more than a personal. It'll be more like on the unconscious level than the conscious level of the first house. So you can look to the full moon in Sagittarius, which is actually a lunar eclipse on the 5th of June, for that real kind of like break in your personality or the way of doing things in your life. So that, especially for you late degree Scorpios, next month will be very transformative for you in that regard. Okay, so on the 11th, we have Mercury going into that 8th house in Gemini. And so your mind is really on those deeper matters. Again, you may be kind of like looking at your own emotional responses, especially coming off of that full moon. And it's like psychoanalyzing yourself and trying to figure out why you're feeling the way that you're feeling about something. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if it has to do with a relationship issue. You're going to be aligned with that scorpionic sense of, deep psychological analysis and also psychic ability. And on the same day, Saturn goes retrograde in your 4th house of home and family. So another water house. And this is going to be for several months that this occurs. And this is going to be a time when some of the responsibilities that you have undertaken that have a 4th house flavor to them are going to be re-examined. Now, this is very important. I have to really say, because Saturn just went into Aquarius, so it is highly possible that you have not yet really experienced any of that at this time, Scorpio. When Saturn transits your 4th house, it's a time when you may feel that you have to take care of your mother or somebody in your family of origin. It might have some kind of thing to do with a property that you own. Perhaps you're having a hard time selling it and you need to make some sort of repairs, or if you're building a house, which I could see being done during Saturn in the 4th house, there is some kind of a work stoppage, and then it makes you even think if you want to do it at all. I mean, that it's up for review, and it's really about, because the nature of Saturn is to put in a lot of hard work into something, you want to make sure that you're doing something right. Saturn is about foundation, so you're not trying to just like do something very shoddily and quickly. So there might be some kind of delay with your home environment in some way. But like I said, I think that it's very probable that your third house may be where you see a lot of this. So any kind of training that you're undertaking, especially in July when Saturn goes back into Capricorn, that will, because you've already dealt with this area, that might come more into play. Now, because the third and the fourth houses are involved in this retrograde, this could also have to do with mother and siblings. So if you have been dealing with something, maybe like an inheritance, there was something about an inheritance that I saw. Well, eighth house matters. Okay, that can be that can be death and inheritance. You may feel like these people are keeping you down. So if you've always felt like this, Scorpio, that you were the black sheep, and that this is really kind of emphasizing itself to you, and you're questioning those obligations. Saturn can be about duty, and family is one of those areas that even if you're having a lot of problems with people, you give them a break that you would probably never do if this person was a friend and they treated you like that. And then you're saying, wait a second, they say blood is thicker than water. But, thick blood isn't necessarily a good thing. It can cause heart attacks. So, anyway, so that's happening. And on the 13th, Mars goes into Pisces, the fifth house. This is another reason why I think there might be something connected to some other romantic entanglement. Perhaps some Scorpios are having an affair, or there's somebody that is really that you're super attracted to. The fifth house can be recreational sex, and I know that the eighth house that you rule, Scorpio, is spiritual sex. And I know I'm going to get an earful from some Scorpios who say, I don't cheat, I never do this, I never do that. Maybe you don't cheat. Maybe you have talked it over with a partner and confessed that you are in love with somebody else, or you're attracted to somebody else, and you aren't cheating. I don't know. But Mars is the libido, and in the fifth house it's like on steroids. And it can also be that love becomes, even with a committed partnership, it can be that love becomes rather combative. Like there's an edge to it. There's your relationship has a lot of conflict attached to it, or simply a lot of spice attached to it. The fifth house can be conceiving children. Maybe you're trying to. And something with Saturn retrograde has, who knows, maybe it's even like lessen the resolve to be strict about it. Perhaps you wanted to keep your household numbers down, and now you're like, I want another child, and I'm going to try until I, am fertile. Until I succeed. On the same day, Venus goes, and if you're an artist, this can just make you more driven in your artistic endeavors. This is good for competitive sports because the fifth house is sports, and Mars is very competitive. Venus retrograde on the same day at 21 degrees of Gemini in the eighth house. So this means that Venus is in that eighth house. Okay. Well, I would say too that anything connected to an inheritance or like even a I don't know what you call it, but when you're getting divorced and the money that is split up. Somebody wrote to me and told me that, but I forgot what they call it. It's not an estate, but splitting up the money between two people that are getting divorced. That kind of thing can come into question, or something is not happening, because Venus in a house can mean that you're getting money, but retrograde, it might be delayed. So, any kind of thing that's going on in that regard. A relationship that you thought was getting very intimate becomes a little bit, a little bit like going backwards. And an example would be perhaps like if you were working on your marriage and you thought you had gotten, you kind of broken through and maybe had those feelings deepen, and something kind of makes them go away. Now, again, Mars in the fifth house can mean that some people they're kind of like torn between two lovers. And I think in some cases this could be because the physical relationship of your committed partnership, perhaps that has been lacking, and that left an opening for something in the fifth house where you just really felt that strong connection. Because I have read and I have heard Scorpios tell me, no, I don't just sleep around. I'm very, I can be celibate for a long period of time and yada yada. But you know what? Scorpios are still human. And let's say you have been in a marriage or long-term relationship where you haven't been intimate with that person, physically intimate in a long time because of other issues. And somebody else comes along who you're very attracted to. Yes, I think you might break tradition or kind of do something a little bit unexpected, especially since Uranus is opposing your sun. Uranus is in Taurus. You may do things that go against what you would expect to do. And so there is that as well. So Uranus, yeah, I didn't even think about this. Uranus is transiting through that seventh house and it's opposing your sun. So I wouldn't be surprised. So on the 14th, Jupiter goes retrograde, and this is at 27 degrees of Capricorn. And this is your third house. And, there's that third house again showing up. Saturn will not be there retrograding until July. But anything, you may have felt like your siblings had been cooperative, helping you even, and now it feels like that's not the case. Understand that you're going to resolve these things. Retrogrades are like kind of blips in the action, and when they get resolved, it's much more full steam ahead. Because in the initial stage, when a planet is transiting, you know that it's got to retrograde, so you know that it's not fully, understanding what the transit represents. It's only when it retrogrades that it can reflect upon the journey thus far. The third house to have Jupiter here is also about your positive thinking. And you may feel, because of other events that are occurring, that things are not as good as they seem. Don't fall for that, because Jupiter tends to blow things up, and when it retrogrades, you may exaggerate that things suck, and they don't. They actually don't suck. You actually do have an opportunity to make something happen that connects you with your communication skills, if you feel that you have those, because that's what the third house represents as well, or any kind of training that you have. If there's been some kind of delay with that, or you feel like you can't capitalize on training, I feel like in the next, let's see, when is Jupiter turning direct? I don't know exactly. It might be September. I'm not exactly sure. I think it might be August though. But anyway, when Jupiter turns direct, there'll still be probably at least 4 or 5 months where you will have just Jupiter going forward in the third house, and it will be a time when you'll be able to expand the area that has to do with getting more trained, more knowledge, and that will open other doors. So don't worry if something just kind of seems like it's stalling. And also just having this really positive frame of mind. On the 22nd, we have a new moon at 2 degrees of Gemini in that 8th house. And so you may feel that you are resolving something that does involve other people's money. When I say resolving, I don't mean that a certain situation is settled, because that would be more of the full moon in this house. But what I mean is that you have more options. You're planting seeds in this area. This is great for anybody who wants to study metaphysics or who wants to study psychology. I think the best thing, if you really do feel that you are aligned with this, I was going to say astrology. Astrology could be the 8th house too, though. But if you Scorpio feel like you would make a kick-ass psychologist, I would heartily agree. But what about if you combined it with metaphysics? Wouldn't that be something? Because a lot of times, straight psychology is just, the premise is so limited that we are, it's almost like our brains are dumb flesh instead of this state of consciousness that can be, completely transformed by, spiritual events. And, there's transformational psychology, let's call it. So anyway, I hope that you are looking forward to May. And if you would like a personal reading, like a natal chart interpretation or a look at the transits coming up with your natal chart, please contact me at rainandmoonastrology.com. The link is below. Take care. Bye.